What would you do if you found out that you had a life-threatening illness and the only way to cure you isn't an option because you don't have a match on the worldwide registry? This is the reality for a lot of multiracial people in need of a bone marrow transplant. I'm sure we can all recall a time when we have gambled. Raise your hand if you've ever bet on a sporting event, or maybe you've taken your chances in Vegas on the slots or at a table. Or maybe you could be one of the many who stop at your local 7-Eleven or gas station to purchase a lottery ticket or a scratch off after work. So most of us have. All right, now put your hands down. Now imagine if you were betting on your life. If the odds of winning the lottery were the same as finding someone who was genetically similar enough to you to donate your bone marrow, or donate their bone marrow. My son was one of those people. You see, I'm multiracial. My mom is Italian and black, and my dad is Mexican. My son's father is black. So essentially, he is black, Mexican, and Italian. Due to my complex genetic background and the fact that I pass that on, obviously, to my child, when we searched the registry comprised of 14 million people, we came up empty for a match for him. So the main topic of this speech is going to be that bone marrow registries lack diversity or lack the diversity needed to save lives. So first, in order to understand that, I need to go over the basics of bone marrow and transplant. Then I'll get into how genetics and ethnic background make a profound difference in finding a match. So bone marrow is the tissue in the center of large bones. New cells are produced in this tissue. And bone marrow contains two different types of cells. One is hematopoietic or pumopoietic, which can produce blood cells, and the other is stromal, which can produce fat, cartilage, and bone. So this is a physical representation of bone anatomy. This area right here, the spongy red area, that is where bone marrow is located. So that's where all your stem cells are, and which produce all your three main blood cell lines. So a transplant introduces a new immune system to the host, which is the person needing or receiving the transplant, and that is done by extracting the bone marrow cells from the hip bones of the donor and then delivering those extracted cells to the recipient via central venous catheter. Many people are under the impression that a bone marrow transplant is like an organ transplant, whereas like it's surgery for the recipient, which is untrue. So the bone marrow transplant itself is pretty boring, to be honest. It is just like a regular blood transfusion that's just done over an extended period of time. But for the donor, it is a small procedure. So let's see. I think that the most profound difference that I found between bone marrow transplant and organ transplant is that in an organ transplant, you are putting one new organ into the body, which the body can reject. But in a bone marrow transplant, you are providing the person with an entirely new immune system that has the potential to attack that person's entire body. So all of their vital organs, versus in an organ donation, their body would just attack that one organ that was transplanted. So if that point doesn't drive that home, like if that fact right there doesn't let you or doesn't show the importance of being genetically similar to your donor, I really don't know what will. Because if your immune system decides to attack your entire body, your transplant is basically a failure, and second, just that graft versus host disease that you can get from that occurring can be deadly. So anyway, to find a donor match for bone marrow is difficult for anyone. Even people who have siblings, the chances of finding a match in your own family are less than 30%. According to the World Donor Marrow Association, if you are Caucasian, you have the greatest potential of finding a donor. It's about a 2 out of 3 chance. and then it goes down from there based off of other ethnicities. And then when you get into multiracial, you pretty much have a less than a 3% chance in the US of finding a match, because less than 3% of US donors on the US registry self-identify as multiracial. So, and that's actually really interesting because the multiracial demographic is the fastest growing in the US, but unfortunately, back in 2000, when the US Census was done, majority of that population was younger, or were younger than 18, which meant that they could not join the registry. And then those same people who are now my age and younger, who are between the ages of 18, or who are above the age of 18, do not know the basics or the need for bone marrow donors on the registry. I know that I didn't prior to my son's transplant. So now that you understand what bone marrow is, the basics of transplant, and the importance of diversity in the registry, how do we resolve the deficit? That's the main question. So step one is multiracial people need to step forward and join the registry. Go online, find a local bone marrow drive. You can go on bethematch.org and fill out the medical questionnaire. And if you're eligible, request a free home swab kit to complete and return. You also can research and spread correct awareness and information to other people so that they know what they can do to help. And also, lastly, if you're an expectant mother of a multiracial child, or if you are multiracial yourself, consider donating your baby's umbilical cord blood, which is rich in stem cells and can save a life. Now that I've explained some important information on bone marrow transplant and the desperate need for diversity, let's review what we've covered. Today I shared the urgent need for multiracial donors on the bone marrow registry. We talked about how being genetically similar to your donor is very important, because if the transplant is not successful, the immune system can potentially attack the recipient's entire body. We talked about how less than 3% of the US-based registry self-identifies as mixed race or multi-race. And we spoke about how to increase diversity on the registry by researching, joining the registry, and spreading accurate knowledge and donating cord blood if possible. I just wanted to close this by saying, this is my son. This is just one person that could have benefited from a more diverse registry. There are countless of others waiting for a chance at a cure. Please visit bethematch.org or mixedmatch.org for more information on how to join. Thank you for listening to my informative speech this evening. Have a good night.